everyone, welcome back to St Mary's Churchyard. We were fearing for the last couple of weeks, but here we are. Nice to see the grass greening up a bit. And I'm talking today about what a terrible dinner guest Jesus was. Our passage, gospel passage tomorrow, Sunday, is from Luke chapter 14. And he is a terrible guest because he says and does the wrong things. He embarrasses his hosts often and a lot of the guests. In fact, he's downright rude and insulting to them. And he tells a little story here. Luke calls it a parable. It sounds like a bit of practical advice and wisdom. If you're invited to a great banquet, a wedding banquet or something, don't go and sit in the best seats because you might be embarrassed if the host comes along and says, sorry, those seats are for somebody else. You need to go and sit over there, over in the corner. No, go and sit over in the corner or further down, and then your host may come and bring you up and say, no, we want you in the better seats. Now, Luke called it a parable because it wasn't really just a bit of practical advice about not, avoiding pride and arrogance. It was actually about Jesus' point was really about putting yourself forward in the sight of God. And his guests at that wedding banquet, that he was at, that meal he was at, were people who were studied in the law of God. They were scholars, they were well off. And the assumption often was that such people were better placed with God than the poor and the lame and the blind, and all the others who were sort of unmentionable or certainly ritually unclean. And Jesus was just reminding them and saying, actually, you're not. Jesus, after all, said, blessed are the poor. And he said, in another very uncomfortable little parable, really, when you hold a dinner, a meal, a banquet, don't invite all your friends who can reciprocate and give you a nice banquet in return. Invite those, like the poor, the lame, the blind, who can't repay you. And you're repaid by God. And in these days of social media where people are vying for attention and wanting the best seats and wanting their 15 minutes of fame, to quote Andy Warhol, this idea of not putting yourself forward, of acknowledging how far you are from God and from the nature of God, is something that we need to hear. We shouldn't just expect God to love us. He does love us. We shouldn't expect God necessarily to be generous, but he is. And if we're just open with God and honest with God, we acknowledge our faults and failings, and rather than put on airs, to use an old phrase, we may find that God is a lot more welcoming than we realise. And that if God is generous to us as he is, we are called to be generous too. Amen. All right.